Good morning and welcome to another episode of the America Safe, America Strong webinar series hosted by The Blueprint. My name is Derek Miller. I'm the president of the firm, and today's 20-minute safety solution is presented by Robert Peterson, Senior Product Manager with Tingley. Now listen, according to Osha, slips, trips, and falls are among the leading cause for general workplace accidents, and they are the second leading cause for all workplace fatalities. Moreover, and amazingly, even with this data, there is no slip resistance performance standard currently used and followed in the market. Thankfully, that is all about to change. Now, over the next 20 minutes, you're going to learn about some of the most contributing factors to these shocking numbers and how Tingley and the industry are addressing this massive issue. Now, here's what's going to happen. Robert is going to spend about 10 minutes with you reviewing slip-resistant facts and causes and solutions and some upcoming market changes. And then the Blueprint's marketing director is going to turn our attention over to you and your questions. Now, on the right side of your screen, there's a text box. We ask you to enter all of your questions into there, and we'll address as many of those as time permits. Also, on the right side of your screen, there's a handouts tab. There you can find downloadable spec sheets on products. You can also find a contacts page for all of your Blueprint and Tingley team members. Now, following today's session, we're going to send an email to each of you, and that's going to recap this meeting, and we'll also answer all of those unaddressed questions that you ask here. Now, don't forget, we're going to be giving away a free pair of Tingley's new comfortable waterproof Badger boot. Now, we are really excited to share today's impactful safety solution with you. We ask you to just kick back, relax while Robert and Jessica take you through today's 20-minute safety solution. Robert?
As you heard Derek say in the intro, what many people don't realize is that in the United States today, no U.S. government agency mandates performance specifications, nor is there any industry consensus that defines slip resistance for PPE footwear in the U.S. That's astonishing when one considers that OSHA states that slips, trips, and falls constitute the majority of general industry accidents, cause 15% of all accidental deaths, and are only second to motor vehicle accidents as a cause of fatalities. The lack of a slip resistance performance standard is about to change in the near future, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Before we get to that, we need a background on the factors that affect slip resistance. We'll follow that up by reviewing specifically how Tingley leverages our 125 years of experience in rubber technology, engineering, and manufacturing to ensure our footwear products keep people safe and on their feet. Then we'll move on to coefficients of friction and an overview of the ASTM F2913 standard test method. And we'll conclude with the upcoming standard performance specification and spend some time on Q&A. So there are many factors that need to be considered when we're talking about slip resistance. Human factors, which could include the walking gait, the age, the mobility, vision, distractions, and even reaction time. Location factors, they could include the perception of hazards, lighting, obstacles, stairs or ramps. There are flooring factors, including the type of roughness or age, maintenance on the floor, presence or absence of polishes or waxes, and perhaps most importantly in this category of factors are the presence of absence of contaminants like water, soap, oil, or greases or bloods, either alone or in multiple combinations. And as footwear manufacturers, the area where we have a laser focus and the most influence are the footwear factors. These would include things like the fit, soling materials, tread pattern, construction, flexibility, and we want to always be sure that we're striking the optimal balance between abrasion resistance and the softness of that sole so you can get a good grip. So let's talk about our specific Tingley technologies. We are a manufacturing participant on several ASTM committees, and we're actively engaged in the creation of ASTM consensus standards. We offer an extensive range of protective footwear to give customers a comprehensive selection in a one-stop shopping experience. One of the main obsessions for footwear manufacturers like Tingley is the outsole tread pattern. So manufacturers will often use specific tread patterns for specific end user applications. For example, a tread pattern with a wider, more open cleat elements would be optimal for footwear worn primarily in outdoor applications, where mud or sand, manure, uneven terrain is likely to be encountered. Such tread patterns are often called lug or cleated patterns because of the preponderance of the large cleated areas separated by wide, relatively deep channels. Conversely, for footwear intended to be worn indoors in a food processing plant, for example, the focus will be more on a tread pattern that can provide the most ground contact, along with design elements that can disperse or direct liquids when walking on wet floors. So a tread pattern like the Tingley Chevron Plus that combines as many sharp edges as possible to bite down through debris to make a firm connection with the ground, combined with directional flow channels, is an excellent universal tread pattern for food processing. Both the cleated and the Chevron Plus outsoles have the added advantage of being self-cleaning because every step taken by the wearer ejects any contaminants trapped in the treading. This helps in not only reducing the likelihood to tracking contaminants from one area to another, but more importantly, it helps to ensure that the treads remain free of debris that could otherwise clog the tread and decrease slip resistance. So, knowing the importance of edges then, shouldn't we just maximize that? Well, the concept of maximum edges can be taken to an extreme in something called a safety lock tread pattern, where there are literally thousands of sharp edges in a very tight tread pattern. The drawback here, however, is that any aggregate contamination, maybe vegetable debris or grit or things like that are on the floor, they may enter and remain lodged in the treads. And over time, this will clog the treads and ultimately result in decreased slip resistance. So it's important to optimize the tread pattern for the intended application. The other main area of focus for manufacturers is the composition of the outsole. The outsole material needs to be sufficiently hard to avoid a rapid abrasion, yet soft and flexible enough to make a strong contact with the floor. The material must also be capable of withstanding repeated exposure to chemicals, and it needs to be able to handle a wide temperature range. So this is where the science of formulation and the art of compounding really comes into play. So let's talk about the 2913 test method, and specifically about coefficients of friction. So it's important to point out that a coefficient of friction is not the same as slip resistance, although the terms are frequently used interchangeably. At the risk of oversimplification, a COF value is determined under controlled laboratory conditions and is directly proportional to the force required to slide an object. In terms of footwear slip resistance testing, the greater the COF value, the more the slip resistant is the footwear. Unlike prior methodologies, the ASTM F2913 determines dynamic coefficients of friction between footwear and floor contaminants under reproducible laboratory conditions. Testing is performed in 3 specific ways to attempt to mimic the walking gait. So there's the forward heel strike, which assesses the coefficient of friction at the critical heel strike of your gait. There's the forward flat slip, which assesses the coefficient of friction at your mid stance. And then there's the backward slip on the forepart, which assesses the coefficient of friction on the toe off. The flooring conditions for the test are numerous, but most frequently tested are dry, wet, oily, oily wet, soapy, soapy oily wet, and then some manufacturers will also test greasy. So in short, with the ASTM F2913 test method, we now have a reliable test that can be used as the basis for establishing a slip resistance performance standard. Let's get into that. While the slip resistance performance standard has yet to be published, the main requirements will be as follows. It considers only the forward heel strike and the backward forepart. The forward flat slip is not going to be part of the standard. And it also tests only the dry and wet flooring conditions. If you achieve an average coefficient of friction value of 0.4 or above, then you would be meeting the requirements. And you can be labeled as SR for slip resistant. Publications expected by the end of March 2021, and will be a first ever performance specification in the United States. for making a slip-resistant claim on footwear. In conclusion, the new performance standard is a milestone in the U.S. protective footwear industry. It provides clear direction for manufacturers to test and claim slip-resistant designation for footwear. It also gives employers and consumers the information they need to make informed choices. The result is an improved probability of avoiding costly slip and fall injuries. The science of producing slip-resistant footwear continues to advance with new materials and innovative tread patterns. Future steps in the right direction might include adding a minimum coefficient of friction requirements for additional flooring contaminants, or for including the forward flat slip in the SR designation. Whatever the future holds, Tingley stands ready to apply our technical expertise in the creation of the standards, and we're committed to being the premier and trusted provider of protective products and services. Tingley keeps people safe.
Thank you so much, Robert. We did receive a few questions via the chat box. And so we do have a few more minutes left in the webinar, so we could answer some of those. You ready?
Yes.
All right. The first question that we received is, will there be testing done on the overshoe option as well?
So right now, as the standard exists, it's just talking about testing a whole shoe, and that would be basically an over-the-sock product. If you start to introduce overshoes and things like that, now you might have to test what's the best combination. Is it just the overshoe over the testing apparatus? Do you need to test that overshoe over a boot of a particular size or shape? So there was a lot more variability in that. So the test for now, the performance for now is just basically focusing on over-the-sock products.
Okay, great. Next question we received, how do I know which outsole pattern will be best for my work environment?
Well, that's a good question. And as we talked about earlier, you want to make sure that you're talking with your sales representatives and making sure that you're understanding the conditions that might be present. What's the floor look like? What might be contaminants that would be on the floor? There is no universal one-size-fits-all tread pattern or shoe for that matter. So you want to make sure that you're getting the best source of information and the ideal footwear for your particular application.
Okay, great. Next question, how do I know when my boot tread has worn too low?
Well, that's a good question. So the testing is obviously done on brand new footwear. And Tingley has kind of thought about this and anticipated something that might come down the line in terms of a slip resistance performance standard. And on several of our footwear products, we've included a tread wear indicator in both the forefoot and the heel area. And what we're doing here is what you'd see sort of on your car tires, where when your treads reach the tread wear indicator, that's the time to replace your tires. On our footwear, when the treading wears down to be level with the tread wear indicator, that's a half-life. You've worn away half the treading. So if you've marked 6 months for that, then you know you might have another 6 months left on the treading.
Okay, very cool. Next question is, how long does it typically take for a standard like this ASTM standard to go into effect once it is released to the public? Will I be fined or reprimanded if my boots aren't compliant with the new standard?
So these are consensus standards, and as we talked to earlier, we mentioned Osha. For now, Osha's only requirement is that manufacturers put their people in safety footwear, and that's for toe impact and compression ratings. We will be marking our footwear as slip resistant, but right now there will be no penalty per se, other than just the natural phenomenon of what safety directors want to put their people in safety footwear. They're going to be looking for that mark, but I don't think there's anybody that's necessarily going to be outright sued immediately if they don't have that mark. And there will be a period of time for this to roll out and for footwear manufacturers to adopt it in labels. So it'll be an ongoing phenomenon.
Okay, great. So it looks like we have time for just one more question. And that question is, why has it taken this long for a standard like this to be written, knowing that slips, trips, and falls are always at the top of OSHA's violation list?
That's a great question. We could spend a long time talking about that, but I'll be quick. These are consensus standards. Manufacturers, industry participants, safety personnel are all involved and invited to attend the ASTM committees and to participate in the creation of these standards. They are consensus standards. So how long it takes sometimes can be a matter of debate. But also in this particular case, the ASTM did have a number of previous test methods that they had employed, and then they had to withdraw them because they were not reproducible. So you kind of needed that reproducible test method to be the foundation upon which you could collect data and then establish a performance criteria standard. So it was a number of different factors, but it took some time.
Okay, great. Well, Robert, thank you so much for your time today. I think we all really learned a lot. And now we're going to bring Derek back out to close us out. Thanks,
Great.
Robert.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Jessica. Hey, Robert, what a great presentation. It's exciting to know that Tingley and the industry are addressing this massive issue. What some great information, folks. As you can see, Tingley really does offer some real-time expert knowledge and solutions for your slip resistance footwear needs. Please contact your local Blueprint representative and schedule your virtual or in-person discussion. Remember, tomorrow, each of you are going to receive a follow-up email recapping this meeting. We'll be addressing all your unanswered questions, and we're going to be announcing the winner of the free giveaway. Now, again, if you did not get a chance to download any of the handouts, no worries. We're going to include those in the recap email as well. And stay tuned for the next episode of the America Safe, America Strong webinar series hosted by the Blueprint. It'll be taking place on Thursday, April 1st at 9:15. I'd like to thank each of you for your time and for your attention today. Stay safe, stay strong, go America.